My name is Charlie Caspary. I'm the chair of the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission. I want to thank you all for attending. I want to note that this meeting is being conducted via teleconference as a result of the COVID-19 emergency and the governor's executive orders to protect public health by limiting public gatherings. Links for the meeting, including a phone call option, will be posted on the Bay Restoration Commission's website, and I will ask Caitlin Gray to explain the limitations and uses of attending the meeting virtually. Caitlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for instructions on participating in remote meetings of the Commission and providing public comment, you can visit the Commission's meeting agenda webpage. All executive committee members will be able to unmute themselves as needed, but we ask that microphones stay muted unless participants are speaking. All public participants will remain muted, and Commission staff will unmute you when it is your time to speak. If participants have questions or comments, please use the raise hand function that's found at the bottom of the screen on the Zoom app. Or if you're participating by conference line, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself. This meeting is being recorded, so we ask that you please speak clearly when providing public comment. And if there are issues or lags in the meeting broadcast, we may disable participant video streams to preserve bandwidth. So that concludes the overview of the meeting logistics. And Mr. Chair, I'd recommend we move to executive committee member attendance and introductions.
Thank you very much. Please call the roll, Caitlin.
Certainly. I will call members in alphabetical order by last name. Okay. Member Caspary.
Here.
Member Clark.
Here.
Member Ford.
Barden, here.
Thank you. Member Gray. You may have to dial *6. Oh, thank you. Member Littman.
Here.
Welcome. Member Luce.
Here.
Welcome. Member Tremblay.
Here.
Member Wagoner. Member Wagner. Sorry, I think we missed.
Here.
Oh, thank you.
It's weird, I'm having audio issues, sorry.
Not a problem. And Member Yelensky.
Here, thank you.
And I don't believe I missed any executive committee members.
Caitlin, I just got text message. The phone number that in that 350. It's EJ Caldwell. Alternate.
Okay. Thank you. Alternate for West Basin Municipal Water District. I will mark him as present, although the member Gloria Gray is also present. That concludes introductions.
And Gloria, pardon me, and Caitlin, would you also announce other members of the commission that are in attendance at this meeting?
Certainly. So my name is Caitlin Gray, staff of the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission. Guang Yu?
Yeah, this is Guang Yuan, Chief Administrative Director of the Commission. And I also just want to acknowledge that, yes, we have several governing board members attending, including Laurie Newman. And yeah, I think at this time, yeah. Oh, Randy, yeah, now I say Randy Rodriguez from representing Fish and Wildlife.
I want to thank you all for attending and thank the members of the public that are attending also. We will start the meeting off by taking public comment on matters not appearing on the agenda. And I believe we have some speaker cards for that. And I would have staff call the first speaker. We have 5 or 6 speaker cards, have received 5 or 6 speaker cards. Some requested speakers have also submitted written communication, which was distributed regarding agenda items. So I'm going to request that public speakers limit their time to 2 minutes. And I would call the first speaker. Caitlin?
Thank you, Chair. We received one request in advance to comment under agenda item 1. And this person would also like to comment under agenda item 2D3. So I will call, excuse me, Roy Vanderhoek. Give me one moment to, sorry, I'm having screen share issues. So if it's all right, I can track your time separately. Just a reminder that the 4 minutes is a combined total for all agenda items, but you now have the floor, and I may interrupt when, or I will interrupt when you have about a minute left, just to give you a sense of time. Thank you.
So just to clarify, my name is Roy Vanderhoek, but at 2 minutes, can I stop my public and then have my other 2 minutes at the time of item 2? Or do you want?
Oh.
Go ahead.
My understanding is that it's 4 minutes for all agenda items. I know the chair requested that if you submitted written comments in advance to consider limiting your time, but I don't believe you submitted written comments. So if you'd like, I can let you know when you're at about the 3 minute mark. So that'll give you about a minute left. And I can let you know when you've reached that 2 minutes as well, so that you can reserve your 2 minutes for the other agenda item.
Okay.
That makes sense.
That makes sense.
Okay.
I'll try to stop at 2 minutes, but okay. I'll appreciate the warning at 2 minutes. Okay. My name is Roy Vanderhoek, and I'm an environmental scientist and environmental educator, and interested in everything on Santa Monica Bay. So thank you very much, and all of you for coming to the meeting and your kindness and professionalism in being here, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I would like to say that at the Biona Wetlands, part of the Biona Wetlands is privately owned by Sempra, the San Diego-based company that we call SoCal Gas, and they have about 100 acres, and part of it is a cliff slope, maritime vegetation, and a part of it is a bluff top, grassland and scrub, and a part of it is down at the base of the wetlands, and it's woodland for butterflies, monarchs, at times, and nesting hawks and owls and songbirds in migration. And there is a wetland with a tidal creek that goes through the private property fence of the gas company, and then comes on the west side, and then goes out at the east side.
Mr. Vanderhoek, you have about a minute left for the 2 minute mark.
Okay, thank you. And we'll remind me again at 1 minute left, and then I'll have my 2 minutes later at the item 2. Thank you. So in my last few 1 minute here, I would like to kind of talk a little bit more about the Sempra Gas Company. The city of Santa Monica has just submitted a letter from the mayor saying they want that gas facility to be decommissioned, which would gain us 100 acres of open space land for endangered species and fishery habitat. Currently, 4 species of fish can be found every day at high tide on the gas company land. And that gas company land borders the Ecological Reserve, but it's not part of it. So I'm not talking about where a gas is stored below ground. I'm talking about the above ground area. It's kind of nicknamed the tank farm, but it's privately owned. And we've now found that other entities have inholdings within that. And
I guess, Mr. Vanderhoek, that's the end of the 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I hope you'll call me on item 2 too. Thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you, Roy.
So
Welcome, Charlie.
We do not have any other commenters for this item who submitted requests in advance. I do see Jane Velez Mitchell has her hand raised. She indicated she would like to speak under item 2D3. I'm not sure if she would also
I will wait to that item then. Thank you, Caitlin.
Okay. So
Thank you.
I do not see any other requests to comment under this agenda item.
Thank you very much. Then we will move to executive committee business and the order of the agenda. I have one change proposed to the order of the agenda, and that is to move item 3, member comments and announcements, to immediately follow 2D III. And those member comments will take place prior to the closed session. If there are no objections, I will make that change in the agenda. Any objections from governing board or executive committee members? Does staff have any other changes proposed to today's agenda? Guang Yu?
We do not, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Then the order of agenda is established. And I will now call Chief Administrative Director for his report, and to be followed by Tom Ford, NEP Director, and his report. Guang Yu?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My report will be brief and just quickly go through the major staff activities since the last executive committee meeting. As we know that there is a governing board meeting between these two executive committee meetings. So preparing for that governing board meeting is one of the key activities that carried out by staff. In short, staff collaborated with the Bay Foundation staff in finalizing the annual NEP work plan and the revised comprehensive monitoring program, and submitted both, had them approved by the governing board at its April 15th meeting. And staff also collaborated with the Bay Foundation and completed the National Actuary Program semi-annual progress reports, which were submitted by the director of the NEP to US EPA by the April 30 deadline. And staff also coordinated with the Los Angeles County Sanitation District, the Los Angeles City Sanitation and Environment, and Chevron to complete and submit the annual Santa Monica Bay Comprehensive Monitoring Program implementation report, progress report, which is actually a permit requirement of those 3 ocean discharges by the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board. So we gave the presentation at the Los Angeles Regional Water Quality Control Board at their board meeting on May 13th. And staff also continue to fulfill the duty and the need related to Proposition 84 grant management, and continue to spend significant amount of time assisting legal counsels dealing with ongoing lawsuits, including a couple of deposition proceedings. And so, yeah, and actually, as I said, in short, so that's a quick summary of the staff activities. And I would like to actually, unless there's any questions, I would like to turn it to Tom Ford. And actually just quickly mention that as part of Tom Ford report, he's going to present the work up to date that we have on developing the NEP logo, which as part of my report, I just want to say that we also participated in the discussion and work to design the NEP logo, that Tom Ford will tell you more about it. Any questions?
No questions? Thank you, Guang Yu. Tom?
Thank you, Guang Yu. Thank you, Charlie. Caitlin, are you screen share ready or no? All right. Thank you. So, Guang Yu already mentioned it, but as part of this past work plan, or I should say the current work plan that we're involved in, and in response to comments that we received from the EPA during the performance evaluation for the Santa Monica Bay National Estuary Program, it was an effort to increase the visibility and identity of the NEP itself. And so part of that effort involved coming up with a logo. Earlier this year, we went through a selection process, picked an artist, and then with a small committee of EPA, SMBRC staff, and TBF staff, we went through a few iterations and were able to arrive at a final NEP logo. Sorry, there's a Cessna over my head. We just wanted to take the opportunity to present it to you all today. So I think Caitlin's going to pop it up on the screen for you. There she is. Very pleased with the outcome of this, and my compliments to the artist. His name is Kevin Kuchwatewa. He's based in Seattle at this point in time. Did spend a few years living down in the Ventura area, and he was like, oh, I miss Southern California and all those cool beach vibes and everything. And I was like, and don't forget the sun, right? So I think a bunch of that influenced his thinking on this. I've enjoyed exploring the symbology baked into this, and I really do hope that you all find it to your enjoyment as well. All right.
Well, that is a beautiful looking logo. I think that the full governing board ought to adopt it by resolution. And I would make that recommendation to the executive committee to see if there's concurrence on that. Any members of the governing executive committee have thoughts on that, or staff?
I think it's beautiful. I don't know if the SMBRC can adopt it as a state agency, but we can make some kind of, you mean a resolution supporting the NEP, the NEP's adoption of it? Something to say that we really love it and that it represents the organization well.
That we between the commission and the foundation and the EPA that all have a hand in making a success of the NEP. Mm-hmm. I think that the commission needs to endorse it.
To endorse it. Great.
So yeah. I would ask that, yes, Tom?
Yeah, no, Charlie, I think that makes sense to me. We may have to double check on the actual pathway for the process, but the governing board as the policy committee of the NEP, I think has the leeway to take that action, and the proper relationship would be integral to the motion. So appreciate it. I'm glad you think it's beautiful. I think we were all very pleased with it, and I'll spend some time working with staff on both sides of the commission to figure that out.
Thank you, Tom.
You're very welcome, sir.
Just quickly before, Mr. Chair, in that case, maybe Eric, feel free to speak out that we will add this to later discussion during the potential agenda, governing board agenda items.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I'll bring it up again in the proper place on the agenda.
All right. I'll be happy to proceed with my notes for you today.
Please do.
In addition to the logo, it was also the intention with this current year's work plan to develop a website for the SMB NEP, where standalone SMB information, materials, documents, and I think the usual corresponding about us background type elements are all going to be developed during the course of this federal fiscal year. So by the end of September 30th, that SMBNEP website featuring that logo will also be completed and up and running for the service of this greater community. Sticking to NEP specific work, we also have submitted our semi-annual report to the EPA on schedule. I've received some comments back from Erica. I'm trying to address those and conduct a little bit of outreach to help clarify some of the questions that she had, or she and others. I'm not sure the author necessarily of all the questions. And once those are addressed and that report's finalized, per past practice, we'll make that report available to the commission as well as post it on our website at the Bay Foundation so that the public can enjoy it. There's a slight twist in the format from this past year's federal guidance. I like it. I'd love to say that it made the report smaller, but it didn't. But I think you're going to love it nonetheless. In case, because I know we've got a busy agenda, in case I start running short on time, just in sort of a precursor to my other comments, there's a lot that our community engagement program staff had to overcome this past year with COVID-19 response. Usually these are the folks that are, tabling, going from boat to boat, dock to dock, meeting face to face with different communities of people to engage them in our work. So they had to move all of that virtual, all of that online. I think they've come up with some really cool tools, virtual interactive videos, and a number of items. I'd love to feature that as a part of the director's report or a separate item at the June governing board meeting if the agenda allows that time, because I think my descriptor of it doesn't do it justice, and I'd love the opportunity to show you some of those products that they've produced. Similarly, and maybe getting out a little ahead of myself, opportunity in August to present on the report that we'll produce in July about the progress that has been made and the results of those efforts in Area B in the Biona Wetlands Ecological Reserve, the restoration site located there. There's always a good deal of interest in the progress that's being made there, and we'd love the opportunity to present those results at the upcoming August meeting. Shifting off of the landscape and into the ocean here for the start of my comments to you. We will be out planting abalone next week on Monday with our partners at NOAA, the State of California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and Power Marine Research Group. So this will be the second time that we've put white abalone out onto the Palos Verdes Peninsula. We additionally contributed to outplant efforts this week down in Point Loma in the recovery of that endangered species. Happy to say that the ocean looks to be in a very fine ecological state this spring. Lots of algae on the bottom, clear, cold water. So hopefully that'll be a very welcoming environment for those snails as they get out there. Also happy to report that we continue to make progress through the early stages of site characterization and permitting for eelgrass transplanting. In this case, deep water offshore species from Catalina Island to 3 sites. So from Catalina into Santa Monica Bay and 3 sites in the South Bay, where we think we'll have some good success adapting techniques to either reestablish or establish that population in the South Bay. We've attracted interest from researchers at UCLA and at Scripps in that work as well to help us characterize biochemical responses and carbon sequestration potentials for that habitat type. We also had we had a publication come out regarding 10 years of monitoring associated with the Palos Verdes Peninsula, encompassing the kelp forest restoration work there. Came out in the Marine Ecological Progress Series. The title of the paper is Sea Urchin Mass Mortality Rapidly Restores Kelp Forest Communities. I think it really helped clear up some questions about the effectiveness and the results of the work on Palos Verdes. It's gotten a lot of attention. Have to thank our co-authors and the lead authors in this case from Van Tuna Research Group, Cal Poly Pomona, us at the Bay Foundation, and NOAA for that. An additional set of data that came in this year through monitoring supported by LA County Sanitation Districts and others marked the increase in kelp canopy off of PV over the past from a period of time of 2011 to 2018. Those increases across sites that we worked at were 119%, 349%, 524%, 159, 14, and 631% respectively across a variety of sites. So I think what we're seeing is that response that we hope to see from those efforts, and I'm very thrilled to be able to share those results globally at this point in time. Sorry, my allergies are having their way with me today. So we got a chance as a staff to spend the day together for first time in over a year at the Culver City Rain Garden. So the Bay Foundation staff all got together, did a bunch of weeding in that rain garden that captures and treats and infiltrates stormwater coming off of residential landscape, largely single family homes, bordering the bike path on Biona Creek. So it was very nice to see everybody out there and to contribute to the upkeep of that site. Our staff who work on the watershed programs have continued to monitor the Santa Monica Beach pilot restoration project. That seems to be going very well. The sand has accumulated, the plants are growing. Hopefully we'll see some more interesting results come out of the ongoing and annual monitoring of that site. Up at the Malibu Living Shorelines project site, which is on Zuma and Westward Beach, we removed 25 tons of ice plant off of those rudimentary dunes there to make room for native vegetation. That occurred during the past few months. I'm moving forward in my notes. Sticking on beach projects and dune and fore dune and back dune restoration efforts. We continue to conduct outreach and permitting for Manhattan Beach projects and Dockweiler Beach projects. And we had a chance to sit down and kind of turn the next set of wheels with the Los Angeles World Airports and their advancement of restoration planning as well as restoration practice at the Los Angeles dunes. So that's going, I think, considerably well. We're also going to be able to help support the Topanga Lagoon restoration process and to advance post-restoration monitoring in Topanga and Malibu Lagoon, respectively, by getting some of our sensors deployed out there this summer in support of the RCD and California State Parks. I already mentioned, without providing much detail, can't wait to share with you some more of the results associated with restoration efforts in Biona associated with the efforts of this past year on that site in Area B. Very excited to continue to see the interest in the efforts of both the City of Los Angeles and the County of Los Angeles trying to advance wastewater recycling for the Los Angeles region. Obviously, that is helping divert water from being discharged into the bay, get that into the ground to enhance our water supplies and follow through on the safe, clean drinking water that our community obviously is interested in and requires. And perhaps in addition to those efforts from a bay ecological or condition standpoint, there's a publication that just came out this week, if I've got it correct, in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences from UCLA, regarding the origin of the nitrogen that we find in Santa Monica Bay. So the anthropogenic nitrogen that we find in the bay appears that 97% of it, according to this study, is in the origin of wastewater discharge. So it's exciting potential, I think, with the recycled water to help us start to address that significant input. And I see your hand went up, Martha. If you want to jump in here now, you're welcome to.
Yes. You know, what's interesting, we were just talking to a Squirt earlier, and it turns out that UCLA release was written by a student, and it's a little premature, right? As you're aware, there's still a lot of work being done. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know that a request was actually made to retract that, since, you know, there's a lot of work to be done, and it just seemed in reading it a little misleading that this was already determined and the work to being done. So anyway, I just wanted to make you aware of that.
Oh, I appreciate that, Martha. If I can't get clarity on my own with that, hopefully you'll welcome me giving you a call so I can learn more.
Yes, definitely.
All righty. Thank you so much. We've got a lot of activity happening in MPA outreach and education. I know that other entities, part of the NEP, do that as well. Again, I hope to help, hopefully we'll encompass with a more focused presentation in June about our community engagement programs, where that resides. We started our summer session with the bulk of our interns and faculty at LMU as part of the Coastal Research Institute's efforts this year. So this is their first week of 6 for their concentrated approach to studies. I'll be happy to share a few more details of that at the June meeting as that work progresses. But happy to see that we're able to get our faculty and the students out in the field again and in limited laboratory settings due to all the progress that we've made on the pandemic. Last few pieces, we're rigging up R2 Deep 2 to go deeper than the past infrastructure and some of the engineering associated with that remote operated vehicles, so that we can get down deeper in the bay and find out what's happening, perhaps as far down as 400 to 900 feet in depth. I guess we'll have to see how comfortable we feel before it goes, because we don't want to smush the thing. And we had to suspend our aerial survey initiatives, mapping vessels in Southern California. If you're familiar with this, we were looking at how fishing vessels may be responding, or other vessels may be responding to MPAs. We couldn't go up in the plains because of COVID. We tried to replace us with GoPro cameras. Turns out that I'm not as replaceable by a GoPro camera as I thought, so I feel good about that. We'll try to pick that work back up again once we get the all clear from our partners at Lighthawk and other folks involved. Last piece on my notes here, and I'm sorry for the maybe less than linear nature of this today, is there was a meeting of the Palos Verdes Shelf Technical Information Education Group, I believe, the PISTIG, and we spent a little bit of time talking about the condition of the processes associated with trying to manage, inform, and explore potential remediation for the Palos Verdes Superfund site. Also spent some time paying attention to the very prominent concerns associated with offshore dumping, historical offshore dumping here in the Southern California Bight. So that's a synopsis of where we're at. You'll be able to find more details on most of those items once our semi-annual report is made public to you, which I expect to happen in the coming weeks. And that's the summary of my report, sir.
Thank you very much, Tom. Are there any questions for Tom? Tom, I have one, and it may be just to kind of ask your advice on maybe think about who the best possible presenter might be to provide an update to the commission on the Superfund sites in the Bay, progress on natural degradation, if that's what's taking place, that type of thing. I'll bring it up on member comments, I think. But again, thank you for your report. Any other questions for Tom or Guang Yu? Seeing none,
Member Yelensky has her hand raised.
Sorry, Erica, go ahead.
Thank you. So I just wanted to call out, it would be great to have you, Tom, do a presentation about the kelp work you're doing, and especially given, I think, the study that you referenced. So maybe offline, picking a time that works for you in the coming months. I think that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erica.
And Mr. Chair, before we move on, unless other members have questions, I do have a question to Tom, or maybe actually a suggestion, because it does seem that Tom was suggesting to present the some of the work that he mentioned, especially the community engagement part of work at the June governing board meeting. So I think there are two options. One is as a separate information item, or as a extended the report from him. But I would like to suggest maybe we can also add this item later when we get to the potential agenda item for the June governing board meeting.
Thank you, Guang Yu. Any other questions, observations? Seeing none, we will go ahead and move on to consideration of approval of the March 18th Executive Committee meeting minutes. I'd like a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Shelley.
And I second it.
Thank you, Martha. Does anyone have any changes proposed? I don't see any hands raised. Let's go ahead, and Caitlin, will you call the roll to approve the minutes, please?
Certainly. Chair Caspery?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Clark?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Gray?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Lippman?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Luce?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Tremblay?
Yes.
Thank you. And Member Wagoner?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion is approved.
Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is consideration of approval of Proposition 50 grant program award process and request for proposals. Guang Yu, you want to take this one up?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is part of the first of the three that we listed as the potential agenda items for the June 6th, 17th governing board meeting. So my suggestion is to go through the three the three proposed agenda items, and then come back to with the addition of the two items that we suggested during the staff report, and come back to vote as a package if we can.
Very good.
Okay, so we'll go through the three items listed, and actually I'm going to ask Caitlin to give the staff report on each of the three items. So start with the first one you mentioned.
Sure. Thank you, Guang Yu, and members of the executive committee. So the first item we've proposed to add to the June governing board meeting agenda is the consideration of approval of the Proposition 50 grant program award process and request for proposals. So we did submit a staff report with details on this, including a preliminary draft of the request for proposals, or the RFP. But just to reiterate some of the background information on that. The commission currently has about $3.2 million remaining for project recommendations under this grant program, the majority of which must be encumbered by June 30th of 2023. And we estimate that we'll need about 12 to 18 months to encumber these funds. So that would include the solicitation and review of project proposals, the development and consideration of approval of a recommended project list, and then the development and execution of grant agreements for the approved projects. And staff recommend initiating the Prop 50 project solicitation process to help ensure the funds will be encumbered by mid-2022. So that would give us about 1 year before the encumbrance deadline. And just for some more background information, in 2018, the governing board established funding priorities for these remaining funds, which are implementation of the comprehensive monitoring program and other monitoring needs identified in the National Estuary Program's Comprehensive Conservation and Management Plan. So with the governing board's adoption of major revisions to the comprehensive monitoring program in April 2021, staff developed a preliminary draft of the RFP for soliciting project proposals to be funded with the remaining funds available. The preliminary draft RFP is consistent with the governing board's funding priorities, as well as the technical advisory committee's 2019 recommendations for priority areas and topics to allocate the remaining funds. This would be in order to provide the greatest value for monitoring and assessing the state of Santa Monica Bay and its watersheds. And that memorandum outlining the tax recommendations was included as an attachment to the staff report for your reference. And staff continue to coordinate with the State Water Board's Division of Financial Assistance staff for their review of the preliminary draft RFP. So in short, staff recommend the executive committee to schedule this item for the June 17th governing board meeting to help meet the encumbrance deadline for these remaining funds, and to direct staff to submit a final draft RFP incorporating any appropriate input from the State Water Board staff to the governing board for their review and consideration of approval at the June meeting. And that concludes my report. Can answer questions.
Thank you, Caitlin. Are there any questions on this item? Caitlin, I do have one question. And in the draft, it talks about the commission will convene a panel, and it also mentions a review panel. And I would like staff to tighten up exactly who will be a part of that panel, and if a member of the panel chooses, or if that organization that panelists may represent chooses to submit a grant request, the conditions under which they will need to recuse themselves from participating. So the staff report is not black and white on that issue, and I would ask that staff make it black and white before it comes to the governing board next month. And working.
Thank you, Charlie. Yes, we will. And like we said, actually, that's the reason that we said we will. Definitely, the review panel need to be established. And at this time, yes, we are thinking of engaging our TAC members as well as the water board staff, but we are now ruling out engaging outside experts in that process. And yes, and we're working on and continue to work with legal counsel to the main issue is to sort out if there will be any conflict interest issues, especially with regard to our TAC members. So yes, we will shoot for getting a clear picture before the governing board meeting on this.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from the executive committee on this? Erica.
Thank you. I'm curious. So I noticed that the project range, the funding range is was it 50,000 to 1 million? And it's very hard to compare a $50,000 project to $1 million project. So I just want to call that out. I don't know if that range was kind of predetermined, but I wonder if making that amount higher. I'm glad that there's no match, because I know that can be a barrier to entry. But as you formulate your criteria, anyway, I wanted to call that out. And then also, I know for us, when we review competitive grants, we have a conflict of interest statement, and for all reviewers that they have to sign. And if they need to recuse themselves. So I am assuming that the state board has something very similar, and if not, I will give you ours to use.
Erica, thank you for those two observations. They're very valuable in terms of evaluating this agenda item. I would say that in the actual text of the proposed grant evaluation process, matching funds are the availability of matching funds and the amount of matching funds needs to be identified and is listed as an important component of the application. So matching funds are not strictly required, but they are part of the evaluation process. And so you might take a look at those if you haven't already. And any further comments on that, we'd love to hear them.
Yeah,
thank you.
If I may to add, and in response to Eric's comment, but thank you for that's a good question and comments. With regard to matching fund, yeah, for this it varies from grant program to grant program. For this grant program, matching fund is not required, but we always like to encourage people to provide matching funds, and we may even to give some more credit for people who has provide matching fund versus the organization who does not. So, and with regard to the minimum and maximum, and actually that's still, there is no strict requirement on that, but and that's also actually a subject to change. And I can tell you our preference is actually to having quote unquote relative large projects versus the small ones, but just for the sheer the challenge of managing too many grants with limited staff. But on the other hand, we do want to shortchange some organizations, especially for grassroots organizations, who has good projects and very cost effectively, that and we do not discourage those from applying as well. But we will try to actually encourage collaboration of projects, proponents, if their works are similar or in one particular area, to try to minimize the number of grants that we have to manage.
Thank you, Guang Yu. Are there any other questions for staff on this proposed item? Then let's move on to the next item, and that is consideration of adoption of recommendations regarding Safe Clean Water Program fiscal year 21-22 stormwater investment plans within the Santa Monica Bay watershed. Guang Yu?
Kayleen, take it on.
Sure, thank you, Guang Yu. So this item is following up on the practice that was established last year, in which the governing board adopted recommendations for the Safe Clean Water Program's first round of funding. And that included recommendations for investments within the Santa Monica Bay watershed and encouragements for enhanced standardized monitoring across the broader Safe Clean Water Program. So just for, again, some brief background that's been detailed in the staff report for you. The implementation of Los Angeles County's Safe Clean Water Program is a key action in the action plan of the CCMP. The program was established by the passage of Measure W in 2018 to provide local dedicated funding to increase local water supply, improve water quality, and protect public health. And every year, the program's watershed area steering committees, or WASCs, develop stormwater investment plans, or SIPs, to recommend funding allocations for projects and programs within their respective watershed area. And the program's Regional Oversight Committee reviews each of these SIPs and recommends to the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors whether or not each SIP should be approved. So 3 of these WASCs lie at least partially within the Santa Monica Bay watershed, so those being the North, Central, and South Santa Monica Bay WASCs. And these steering committees are currently developing and considering approval of, and some have even approved, the SIPs for the program's second round of funding, so for fiscal year 21-22. And the Board of Supervisors is anticipated to consider approval of these SIPs in July 2021. So consistent with the approach used for the program's first round of funding, staff proposed to review the fiscal year 21-22 SIPs of the North, Central, and South Santa Monica Bay WASCs and draft a resolution for the governing board's consideration that includes recommendations based on whether these SIPs are anticipated to further the implementation of the CCMP and direction for staff to convey the resolution to the Board of Supervisors, the respective WASCs, and the Regional Oversight Committee for their consideration. Staff is also coordinating with Safe Clean Water Program staff for supporting information on these SIPs to inform our recommendations. And Safe Clean Water Program staff also indicated that they're available to present on this information item at the June 17th Governing Board meeting if desired. So that concludes my brief staff report, and I can answer any questions.
I see no raised hands. Yes, Erica.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Caitlin. So sorry if you said this, but are you going to send a list of the projects, I assume, ahead of time, right? That goes out to the governing board. Okay. For the slate.
Yes. We still have to work with program staff to receive the full list of approved projects within each SIP. That's within the watershed. So once we have those, we'll be able to kind of distribute that information as well as any staff recommendations to the governing board in advance.
Thank you.
Caitlin, have we had our TAC committee review that list at all yet? Or will they have an opportunity to review it and make comments to the governing board?
No, we actually haven't set aside some time in the timeline, just looking forward in the short amount of time we have to the next governing board meeting. We didn't really factor in TAC review for that.
Well, I understand the timeline is tight to make recommendations to the Board of Supervisors. We may want to go ahead and send a list to the chair of the TAC and ask for, do they see any red flags? Okay. I think that would be valuable to me personally. So I'll leave that to staff. And are there any other comments? Tim?
Yeah, if I recall from last year's exercise, we sent a resolution that supported projects that were in those lists that directly impacted the Bay, right? Or did we also include projects that might have an impact on the Bay? We did ones that directly match our CCMP, right?
We looked at projects that were within the borders of our watershed, so not all WASCs, the boundaries of those WASCs line up perfectly with that border. So we considered the projects that were within that boundary. That was the
right. And you said it's 3 WASCs, right?
3 WASCs.
So they'll have a list of projects that you're going to send to all the governing board members in advance so they can see all the projects that are on each WASC's recommended approval to the board. And then we'll have a separate list from staff that's saying which ones amongst those three the commission should consider supporting. Correct?
Yes, that's essentially what we're envisioning.
So, like Charlie said, TAC should be taking a look at that in advance as well, and perhaps they can identify anything even during the commission meeting that needs to be called out, added, or deleted from the long list that we're going to be supporting in all three WASCs, correct? That action could take place at the commission meeting.
I would say we try to get the list to the TAC ASAP as soon as that we get the list from all three WACs, and and so we can ask the TAC chair to speak up during the governing board meeting to see what's and what their take on.
Just so I can wrap my head around it, then Guangyu, about how many projects is each WASC recommending for approval by the Board of Supervisors? I don't recall from last year. Like the big number, like each WASC is going to put forward about how many projects?
There are not that many, and actually total about 5 or 6. Am I correct?
From each WASC?
No, altogether.
Yeah,
those are regional projects, so they generally are big, multi-jurisdictional the project, like
5 or 6 that impact the Bay, or 5 or 6 total?
5 or 6 that fall within the Santa Monica Bay watershed.
I see. And then how many in total beyond? That's what I'm asking. How many projects are going forward in those three WASCs, and then 5 or 6 of them are impact the Bay? But what's the other?
Yeah, the 3 WACs, 2 are completely overlap within the Santa Monica Bay watershed. And the South Bay is the only one that not only include the South Bay, but also include the Dominguez Channel watershed, which is
outside of the Bay or in the Bay?
Outside of the Bay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So and
let me say it a different way. How many total projects are before those 3 WASCs that we're winnowing down to 5 or 6?
They are. I mean, I can only, because I'm more familiar with the South Bay.
Sure.
There, because I'm a member of that WASP.
And like how many in that one?
So like this year, actually, they just stopped their SIP yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like it was there were 4 projects adopted out of 6 or 7.
I see. Okay, I'm just trying to wrap my head around how many total that we're pulling that are Santa Monica Bay. Mm-hmm. It's just for my own edification, so that when I see the 3 WASC recommendations, I know what the total number we're working with that go directly to this commission's work. That's all. I just wanted a little background. Thank you.
And I believe the Central Santa Monica Bay WASC has 8 infrastructure projects, and then potentially additional technical programs that they've recommended in their SIP, but I can confirm that number.
Yeah, and then there's also scientific studies. So again, speaking for the South Bay, in addition to the 4 infrastructure project, there are another 2 so-called technical feasibility studies and 1 scientific studies.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Any other questions? On to the consideration of adoption of resolution regarding public access at the Ballona Wetlands Ecological Reserve.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Oh,
Mr. Chair,
Guang
yeah,
Yu.
quickly on this one, I recognize that there are several people who want to provide a public comment on this item. But as usually what we do, I'll ask Kaylin to give the staff report first and then open public comments and then start member comments.
Yes. Please proceed with the report, Caitlin.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this item is following up on the Executive Committee's direction at its March 18th meeting for staff to draft a resolution of non-binding recommendations to California Department of Fish and Wildlife regarding public access at the Biona Wetlands Ecological Reserve. And I'd also like to note, as Guang Yu mentioned, that Randy Rodriguez, who is Fish and Wildlife's representative on the Commission's governing board, is a guest in today's meeting. In case there's any questions posed, with permission from the chair, he may be able to answer those questions from the Executive Committee. Again, we did distribute a staff report and a draft resolution to the Executive Committee last week, and also attached 16 written comments from members of the public, as well as a comment from Governing Board member Kevin McCune. So just to go over some of the background information provided in the staff report, some members of the governing board and some members of the public have expressed interest in public access at the reserve. Fish and Wildlife manages the reserve, oversees its restoration planning, and permits and manages access to portions of the reserve. Fish and Wildlife has provided information to the Commission on existing public access opportunities at the reserve, including at the August 2020 Governing Board meeting, with a follow-up at the September 2020 Executive Committee meeting. And they also provided information in Fish and Wildlife's October 2020 memo. So that was also attached to the draft resolution. The draft resolution also points to the comprehensive conservation and management plan approved by the governing board in 2018. And the action plan identifies several key actions that aim to protect, restore, and enhance natural habitats in Santa Monica Bay watershed, while balancing the need to provide benefits to the public, including through public access. So those actions we've identified include action 13, 25, and 28. And those are described in the staff report as well. So continuing and increasing public access and educational and stewardship opportunities at the reserve promotes natural habitat values, such as protection and restoration of sensitive habitat and wildlife, while balancing the need to provide benefits to people, would further the implementation of several of these actions in the action plan. So in short, staff recommend the Executive Committee to schedule for the June 17th Governing Board meeting, the consideration of adoption of the resolution we've drafted before you today. The draft resolution recognizes that public access and educational and stewardship opportunities in natural habitats of the watershed are important, but that they must be done in consideration of resources, public safety, and potential impacts from increased presence of humans to ensure projects that protect and restore, improve habitats are not undermined or rendered ineffective. It also encourages Fish and Wildlife to continue public access and educational and stewardship opportunities currently offered at the reserve, and to increase opportunities to the extent it determines such opportunities would be appropriate and feasible in the future. And it also directs staff to convey this resolution to Fish and Wildlife, expressing the Commission's non-binding recommendations. So that concludes my brief report. And I believe now we will move to public comment.
Yes.
Guang Yu.
Yeah, I just want to say I did receive another request for public comments on this item.
How many total?
I believe it's 6, right?
I would ask that members of the public who are commenting on this, please be cognizant of the short time available for this meeting. And don't use 4 minutes if you don't need it. Do not repeat what others have said, except to make reference that you agree with what so-and-so said. Okay, thank you very much. Caitlin, would you call the first speaker, please?
Certainly. The first speaker we have is Walter Lamb, followed by Roy Vandehoek. And Walter, would you like the opportunity to share your screen?
I don't think I'll need to today, Caitlin. Thank you.
Sure. I will be displaying your time so you can reference that.
Great, thank you. I will start off by saying it's taken quite a lot of stakeholder time and effort to get to this point where we've got this resolution, and I am glad that we are on the same page now in terms of the importance of access and the value of increasing access, and also that it is within the non-regulatory scope of the commission. I think the question now is whether the commission will help to facilitate solutions. And I think the starting point for that is whatever the reasons are, which we're still very unclear about as to why, given that we already have funding, staff, volunteers, equipment, curriculum, everything that you'd really need to run a program, what's missing? And we've specifically asked that question now many times, including directly to CDFW and to the commission to say, you know, one of the obstacles that was raised was that there's a lack of funding. And, but no one will tell us what the funding would be used for or how much would be needed. We might have it because we have budgeted for what we think is needed based on what we've seen with other programs. I do not speak on behalf of Los Angeles Audubon Society. I do proudly volunteer for them. And so I'm familiar to a certain extent with, you know, these programs. You know, we got a Little League operating in Area C. We have, you know, also Friends of Biona Wetlands operating in Area B. So if there's a clear and consistent set of standards and reasonable, we obviously will meet those. We just need to know what they are. Obviously, I think we'd all want to avoid, you know, any double standards that are designed to be prohibitive or punitive to certain groups. I think that would kind of go against the whole concept of equitable access. So between now and the governing board meeting, what I'm very hopeful is that people will say this is a problem that we actually want to solve, and that the purpose of the resolution isn't just to give you something to point to sort of, you know, deflect concerns that are raised by the public. And so I'm going to be hopeful between now and June that we can add that. But I'm just going to close by saying it would really be great to, on this call, have somebody answer the question about how much funding is needed and what it would be used for. That would help us move the discussion forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. Caitlin, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'm just setting up the time for Roy Vandehoek. Thank you for your patience. Mr. Vandehoek, you now have the floor. I will display your remaining 2 minutes for you.
Thank you, Caitlin, and thank you, Charlie, Chair. Good meeting. So Roy Vandehoek, Biona Institute President, environmental scientist and environmental educator. I want to address access at the Biona Wetlands, and I see 3 people from the state of California's department there, including Mr. Berg at San Diego headquarters for our area. First, there are some safety risk issues. So I am in favor of why the Department of Fish and Wildlife wants to keep the access on Fiji Way closed. Maybe not for the same reason, but I was there when they were improving the road for access with gravel covering the habitat, and so their vehicles and the gas company could travel easier there. And then it would also serve as a walking access. But with 2 wells there are 17 gas wells on the Biona Wetlands Ecological Reserve, and 2 of those are on that walk path area. And until that's shut down, I don't think it's safe with those injection and extraction wells on the walk route with only a few feet between children, with a chance of having to inhale those noxious gases that are toxic and carcinogenic. So I think that should be closed down. And there's an oil well that the Friends of Biona Wetlands, where they have their education project, I don't think that should be open to the public anymore. That oil well has had 2 oil spills in the last 20 years that have crossed the walk path, and there's vapors that come out from that. On Mother's Day, the access area that is for the Little League was closed to the public, but they were having a Mother's Day celebration there. I believe the access best is to have the bicycle path, and my time is up along the levees where there's an estuary and the most wildlife can be seen. Much more I'd like to say, but thank you very much for the 2 minutes.
Thank you, Roy.
Thank you. The next request we have is from Jane Velez Mitchell, followed by Scott Culbertson. So give me one moment, Jane, to get your timer set up. Thank you for your patience. Jane, you now have the floor.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Jane Velez Mitchell. I'm a journalist and author, a Latina who has lived in Marina Peninsula for 31 years, and I spend a lot of time in and around the Biona Wetlands. Now, proponents of the bulldozing plan, which is now the subject of 6 lawsuits, claim they want to bulldoze the Biona Wetlands in order to provide public access. But we all know you don't need to destroy the wetlands and bulldoze the whole thing, crippling the area for a decade in order to provide public access. You could provide meaningful and mindful public access right now, allowing inner city kids the opportunity to see actual wildlife as opposed to a Disney-fied version of what the wild looks like. The draft resolution you just mentioned spoke about public access must take into account consideration of the impact on wildlife and that habitat must not be undermined. What could undermine habitat and wildlife more than taking bulldozers to the entire area and chasing off the 1,700 species, some endangered, some threatened, who currently live there? There is nothing that is less mindful of habitat than bulldozers. We're talking owls, egrets, pelicans, skunks, foxes, a wide variety of birds, and it's also a migratory landing spot for birds. The other day, I was there at the mouth of the Biona Wetlands and I saw 35 pelicans. I counted them and I videotaped them. And I literally cried thinking, you have no idea that powerful forces who are interested in awarding contracts, et cetera, want to get their hands on your home and chase you off. And nobody is even asking, where will all these thousands of animals go? And by the way, the proponents of the bulldozing got rid of the parking lot they were planning because they know that the rise of autonomous vehicles will make parking lots obsolete. That in turn is predicted to create massive amounts of new space available for green space within the next decade, space equivalent, according to reports, to at least a small city within Los Angeles, scattered about the city where parking lots used to be. It is another argument against destroying the wetlands for green space. The green space is there right now. There is a gentle 20-point restoration plan that would gently and genuinely restore the Biona Wetlands at a fraction of the $200 million plus cost of the bulldozing plan. I would urge all of you to go to defendbionawetlands.org and at least read the gentle restoration plan. It achieves all the legitimate goals of restoration. The only thing it would not allow for is for SoCal Gas digging deep and upgrading its crumbling gas storage facility under the wetlands. The fact is that thanks to the work of activists, and biologists and environmentalists, it is now obvious to everyone that the fossil fuel upgrade is the true agenda of this destructive project. The fossil fuel industry is destroying our climate and putting our residents at risk of another disaster like the Aliso Canyon blowout at a similar facility several years ago, considered one of the worst environmental disasters in California history. That's one reason why the LA City Council just recently voted to support shutting down the gas storage facility in the Biona Wetlands. Instead of blindly supporting a deeply flawed and wildly destructive bulldozing plan, now is the time to shut this facility down and allow the public in while there is nature still there to observe. Is anyone even asking, where will these thousands of animals go? Is that not an abrogation of duty of the organizations that purport to defend wildlife to fail to even ask these questions and demand specific and credible answers? When all the wildlife is gone, which could happen in a decade, will you look in the mirror and say, I should have pushed back more. I should have asked tougher questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Jane. Would you repeat the website of the organization you just referred to?
Sure. It's defendbionawetlands.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
Next speaker we have is Scott Culbertson, followed by Margot Griswold.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks to the SMBRC Executive Committee for this opportunity to speak. I'm Scott Culbertson, Executive Director of the Friends. If you want meaningful, increased public access, then support the Biona Wetlands Restoration Project. The restoration project will add 3.6 miles of bike and pedestrian pathways, 5.5 miles of pedestrian-only pathways, 2,000 feet of boardwalk for pedestrians, 2 bridges to increase safety and access, and provide educational signage and parking facilities. All newly constructed features and trails will be fully accessible, removing the current obstacles and allowing the wetlands to become a gathering place for the entire community. This community includes more than 15,000 disadvantaged households within biking distance and 500,000 within driving distance of the wetlands. The opposition to the project is baffling. If you want meaningful access, support the restoration project. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Next speaker we have is Margot Griswold. And I'm sorry, Guang Yu, you indicated that you received another request.
Yeah, it's from Cassie Knight.
Okay, and so it'll be Margot followed by Kathy. So Margot Griswold, you now have the floor.
Thank you. Margot Griswold, environmental educator and restoration ecologist. I'm asking, along with other public members, that the Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission motion be strengthened to remind CDFW that well-managed access, as currently occurs with responsible nonprofits in small part of Area B of the wetlands, could also be allowed in other areas of the reserve. Let the public experience the wetlands, especially urban communities to the east and south of the wetlands where parks and open space are limited. This type of access for educational opportunities, not necessarily for the recreational opportunities cited in the CDFW response to the request for this increased access of Biona wetlands. I agree that we could easily, without digging out the Biona wetlands, increase public access for recreational opportunities There are two sides currently of Biona Creek, and they could be used. One side for bikes, one side for walking. Be that as it may, in their response to the access issue, the CDFW suggested that public use, they could use other parks within 20 miles of the Biona. They demonstrate their lack of understanding of the community and the parks they recommend. Mainly, much of the access the public is requesting is really to manage educational field trips for Title I schools. My point is that CDFW has no idea about school field trips. For example, LAUSD does not allow field trips to one of the CDFW recommended state parks, Baldwin Hills Scenic Overlook, to say nothing of the time to navigate traffic to parks that they suggest, like Will Rogers or Trippett Ranch, from urban areas to the east and south of the Biona Wetlands. The visitor center at Baldwin Hills Scenic Overlook that is mentioned by CDFW is closed to the public weekdays and weekends, another budgetary constraint. The lack of attention to detail in their response to the Commission's resolution shows their lack of real care for this important issue, public access to state-owned lands. Let the public in with careful management as such as already occurs in Area B, which occurs without any CDFW staff presence. So I'm not sure what the funding is, as Walter Lamb mentioned. What would that funding be? I request that the Commission draft a resolution that strengthens the idea of access, the request for access, or as Walter Lamb recommended, at least to work towards access while we wait out the idea of restoring the Biona wetlands. We can't really wait. Why wait? We already have a plan that was drafted years ago, not only a plan, but an implementation plan. So please let us on the land. The gates are there in Area A. The trails are there. It can be done simply and right now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment.
Hi. Hello. My name is Kathy Knight. I'm project manager for the Biona Ecosystem Education Project. And I've been working for the last over 27 years to save this precious resource. And please, we want access to Area A. We want to go in there, and I support what Dr. Margot Griswold said, everything she said, and we want to be able to go in there and help manage it, take some educational groups in there, and also we could help by cleaning the area up. I mean, I would like to just help maintain this precious resource. So I don't know why we can't do that, why we can't be let in if we are the people who really, some of the people who really worked hard to save this land. Also, I had a hard time getting on to this meeting. I tried to get on, but nobody would, I couldn't get a response back for the password. So I'm sorry, I'm 20 minutes late to get on. Finally, somebody sent me one. But I wanted to make a public comment also about Biona, that the proposed restoration would bring in a lot of salt water to create a saltwater bay. But this bringing in salt water is not a good idea at all, because there's freshwater aquifers there out there on Biona and next to Biona, and they could get contaminated with the salt water. And as you know, if you read the papers, listen to the news, Los Angeles is in a terrible drought period. We're running out of water. The last thing in the world we should even think about is damaging any of our freshwater aquifers, drinking water aquifers. So that's one of the reasons. There's many reasons why this restoration wouldn't be good for the animals or anything else, but we don't want to take any chance of damaging these freshwater aquifers with salt water. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Kathy.
So I'm sorry, go ahead, Guang.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I do see Patricia raised her hand, even though that she did not submit prior request, but I think that usually will allow people who also at the end of the comment period ask if there's additional public comment that people need.
Is that a yes or a no?
So,
It's a yes, Patricia.
Okay.
He was just
Sorry,
letting other people know if they needed to comment.
Am I go right now?
Yes, you now have the floor.
Thank you. I very much appreciate and support the comments made by Dr. Griswold today, and also Walter Lamb of the Land Trust and Kathy Knight's comments. I do not agree that we should allow this site to be held hostage for future restoration when we've already spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to implement these pathways. There has been grading done to make for safe access. There are beautiful gates that have been put in place. And we do have the plans that Margot addressed that are already in place. It makes no sense to withhold access, especially when we've already proven through Audubon, through other groups, even the Land Trust, that we have safe access for people to go in and learn about the wetlands. Sorry. So I advocate for that, and we can do this simply and safely, and actually adding a presence to the wetlands just to know that people are out there. Yes, we can use actually on the north side of the channel, it would be nice to be able to use the south side of the channel as well as an access way. And as far as having the CDFW plan provide trails, provide miles of this and miles of that, we already have good miles of pathways all around the wetlands for access, for bicycles and the boats that are able to use the Biona Channel. So it's a ruse to think that, and actually with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, one of their concerns with the CDFW plan is the access further deteriorates the ability to maintain it as a reserve, which its primary function is to protect the wildlife of this area. The other thing is, I'd like to agree with what Kathy said with regard to the freshwater aquifers that need the protection. I've been engaged with the Water Board and with various cities working on the Groundwater Protection Act that the governor has implemented. Biona has been left out to this point and needs to be acknowledged for all the groundwater diversion that is ongoing, that needs to be stopped. And there is no reason for not allowing this clean, fresh water that is being sent to the sanitary sewer or out to the ocean. There is no need for it to be diverted away from Biona. And with regard to those freshwater aquifers, should SoCalGas be allowed, or not SoCalGas, but should CDFW be allowed to carry forth its plan of digging this area out, all of that infrastructure is then further subject to a great deal more corrosion. due to the salt water on all of that infrastructure. And in their settlement agreement, they have determined that if that water quality changes, SoCalGas will no longer be responsible for having to remediate the groundwater to a drinking water standard, which they are now in the area that they lost the Prop 65 case. Now, that was for a small area, and yet we know from decommissioning studies that Grassroots has provided to the world that they are aware of other contamination. When they leave, they will find. So we need to keep them on the hook for remediation to groundwater that is drinking water standard. And California needs its fresh water, and we need to maintain our aquifers, as the governor is saying, and the unique biodiversity of this land. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your comments, Patricia. Caitlin, do you show any other commenters?
I do not see any other hands raised at this time.
Very good. I'll open it up for discussion by members of the Executive Committee. Any comments, questions for staff?
Member Luce has her hand raised.
Shelley?
Yes, thank you very much. I have some concerns about the resolution as written. I think there are some whereases that are missing. I think the content of it is fine, but there are pieces that need to be added in order for, I think, this committee to support it going to the full governing board. So, for example, I would like to add a whereas that recognizes that the Ecological Reserve has few or zero public services throughout most of its area, and known presence of homeless encampments and illegal activities, including drug use and the storage, processing, and transport of stolen goods. I think we should have a whereas that mentions that substantial hazards are present, physical hazards that endanger the public and expose the state of California to legal liability. And with that, I'm talking about unmanaged trails, completely unmanaged vegetation, fire hazards, as well as the human element, the homeless encampments and criminal activity that occurs there. And I also think we should have a whereas that acknowledges that the intent of the state's restoration plan, among other things, is to increase safe and meaningful public access, and to provide many miles of walking and biking trails along with necessary services such as restrooms and drinking fountains. In addition, not necessarily as a whereas, but I would like to add that the access that I'm familiar with right now in Area B, in the southwest corner, remains safe in part because of the long established presence of an environmental group that's been working there for a long time. Also, it's largely fenced there, and that portion of the reserve is surrounded by homes and businesses and people. So when I go out there on the trail, out to the platform to overlook the tidal channels, I don't feel like I'm in the middle of nowhere and like there could be a bicycle chop shop over there or a drug deal going on right there. I don't feel like that in that area because it's frequently used by people doing productive things and surrounded by people, living in their homes, patronizing local businesses. That is not the case on Area A. I don't have the numbers in front of me of the size of Area A, but it's very large. And on one side, Fiji Way, there's just a road. I think it's a 4-lane road. It's not that well traveled. There's not that many people on it. And the business is on the other side of that. And in fact, on the other side of that road, there's a huge parking lot, and the far side of that, there's some businesses. It's called Fisherman's Village. Ask anyone with Marina Del Rey, they'll tell you it's also not that well used. It's not heavily trafficked anyway, at least not most of the time. So when you are on that part of Area A, there's really no one around. And having an environmental group, I saw the presentation from the Land Trust at a recent meeting. I thought it was a very good presentation. I thought the volunteers or staff that are working with the organization did a great job. I also thought that high school students are not qualified and should not be held responsible for taking children out into Area A. Even if you're staying on those dirt roads or gravel roads or whatever they are, I think it would be very irresponsible for us to put that onto high school students. And I want to remind this group that when we were taking people into Area A, it was with armed rangers from the MRCA, and they were actually conducting their junior rangers training program. And right now, the scientists who do the surveys in Area A go out with DFW staff. So I'm just trying to remind everyone of the baseline that we're talking about here in Area A. And if you haven't been there in a while, then go ride your bike down the bike path, go up Fiji Way, and take a look at the area that we're talking about before we irresponsibly encourage access that could cause harm. Thank you.
Walter, I see your hand raised, but I'm going to raise a procedural issue with the decision to be made by the majority of the executive committee. And the procedural issue I raise is the governing board needs to have a full and complete discussion of this resolution as proposed by staff, in my opinion. I think the proper place to make changes to this resolution is at the governing board meeting by motion and second, and amendments to motions. So I would like to get a feel for or from the executive committee on whether you believe that should be the way we handle it or not. A lot of silence here. Come on.
I'll respond to that, Charlie. I would just say that it's my understanding that this is where we have some of that discussion. And if we wanted to add whereases, for example, as I'm proposing, it might be wise to instruct staff now to do that so that the language is the way staff would like it before the governing board meeting. If I do the same thing at the governing board meeting I'm doing now, then we're going to have to try to wordsmith something there. Whereas it could be added now or over the next month by staff, and then the governing board could take it out if they don't like it. But I'm proposing it now so that it can be considered before the governing board meeting.
Is that in the form of a motion? You know, it's not on as well, I'd like to get some further input from EC members, please.
So I guess I agree with you, Charlie, but one thing, Shelley, since staff has already heard your suggested language, they can have it ready. If the commission agrees, right, Guan Yu and Caitlin, it can be ready.
Yes, that's right. If that's the consent of the or the majority of opinion of the executive committee meeting, then we can get it ready.
And the other thing that staff can do when they bring up the presentation, they can mention the concerns, right? So that they can, you don't have to repeat everything you said, right? You can, you know, they can do it for you. And I would think some of them are familiar. I mean, I'm not familiar with this area, but I would think others are, and you know, might feel the same way.
Any other comments by executive committee members?
If you don't mind, Kelly.
Yes, Kelly.
I think I was a little under the impression we were going to somewhat discuss the substance. So I guess from the way the agenda is written, actually, so it does look like our vote is whether this goes on the agenda or not. I don't think that discussing a little bit of substance ahead of time is a bad idea, but especially because public comment came in towards the substance, not only whether we should.
See you soon. Be well.
No,
But-
I absolutely agree with you, Kelly, that a thorough discussion of this item is warranted at the EC meeting as well as the governing board meeting. I'm just trying to make a process that is clear and transparent for all concerned. And if a majority of the EC meeting members believe that this is the right place to add amendments to it, I'm fine with that. I don't want to make that decision as chair. I want your guys' input on how we proceed with this.
And it may just be useful going forward on an agenda to include whether it's a yes, no vote or there's a discussion, just so everybody can kind of come prepared one way or the other.
Charlie,
Can
my suggestion would be, Eric's on the line here. If we can, maybe you want to ask him what he thinks the limitations are of action taken today, how language suggested by members or from public comment can help inform this resolution moving forward. It seems to me that this is a process-related question, albeit I agree with Kelly, discussing substance and hearing about concerns about the substance is appropriate.
Yeah, Eric, you want to jump in here, please?
Sure. Hi, this is Eric Gilman. You know, I think we have a range of options available to us, from, you know, voting on moving this version ahead to the governing board to discussing substantive changes and instructing staff to make those changes. So I think either way is a possibility. I don't see a limitation in directing staff to make substantive changes at this stage.
Thank you, Eric.
Great.
Lori,
Thank you, Eric. I
got your hand
appreciate
up?
that.
I'm sorry, Tom.
So I was thanking Eric as well. Sorry, Charlie.
Lori, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just, I wanted to suggest as a member of that commission, but not of this body, that I look to you guys to get whatever you think is best on all issues, to work it out here and then bring it before the commission where, of course, it can be amended. But if the amendments that Shelley recommended, if there's consensus, I think it would be important for you guys to decide that and then bring it to us. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Mm-hmm.
Walter, you had a comment?
I'll keep it quick, but you know, it would be nice for the public to be able to comment on these amendments that came out after public comment. And I want to say to Dr. Luce that the two presenters are not high school students. They're college students who have not only worked for us, but they have worked for Fish and Wildlife and the State Water Board, respectively. They're professionals. They have undergraduate degrees in ecological sciences. And that's just one of the many pieces of misinformation that we just heard. There's a
Thank you, Walter. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, I'll apologize for that incorrect reference. I was misinformed. Either way, I have the same concern about sending people out in the wetlands responsible for kids without proper accompaniment or security as was provided when we were doing this many years ago.
So, and Charlie, I know I'm done. I just want to say this is supposed to be a fact-based organization. So the problem is we speak and then somebody speaks without any evidence. And that was just one of many things. So I don't want to disrupt the meeting, but we have a problem with the decision-making process that came out last meeting as well. And I'm just going to leave it at that. If you want the resolution to be something that solves a problem, then let's have the governing board meeting be a discussion there, an open discussion, and then make improvements. What's happening now is there's changes getting steamrolled into this that we know the governing board is probably not going to have a lot of time to review. So I'm going to leave it at that. It's disappointing. The misinformation is very disappointing.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
other members of the executive committee, comments, please.
I think actually Eric wanted to say something.
Yes, Eric.
Maybe not, sorry.
No, I don't have anything to add. Happy to field any questions, though.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Charlie, Roy Vanderhook, I see Walter made a comment. Walter Lamb, may I make a brief additional comment?
Sure.
Much appreciated. I see we have a fourth member of the California Department of Fish and Wildlife here. So we have 4 professional scientists of the department here who understand the issues of their land that they manage and steward. And is it in the resolution, or it ought to be added to have the various kinds of reasons and explanations why they have, they've inherited access issues like the baseball field and the Friends of Biona Wetlands that was from the Playa Vista days was allowed to continue. And they have kind of various reasoning going on that I think needs to have an out front explanation, maybe by them, one of them or all 4 of them at this meeting, how they handle access during these last 15, 17 years. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, Roy.
Member Wagner.
Shelley, would you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Caitlin.
Member Wagner has her hand raised.
Yeah, thank you, Caitlin.
Yes, Claire.
Claire Wagner, alternate for Jonathan Bishop, State Water Board. Just looking at the resolution, I think that point made about who's responsible, and seeing that CDFW is responsible for managing the area. I think Dr. Luce's comment about sort of the liability aspect of it is important to consider. And I think their October memo to the commission highlighted some of their concerns. So, the way the resolution's written and the way I'm reading it highlights sort of the importance of this issue to this commission. I think there's no denying we're in favor of experiencing this extraordinary wetland. And, there's elements of the CCMP that, increased access to certain areas of the reserve. It seems like there's a lot of alignment there. But, working for a state agency myself, I get constraints, funding. There's a lot that goes into decision-making for various aspects of that. And so I think their memo highlights their limitations. And I think the resolution does a nice job of saying, we as a commission really support this to the extent it's feasible for you. But I think the important part is deferring to their sort of expertise in decision-making. And so for that, I think the resolution kind of walks that balance, saying to the extent they could increase access, please do. It would really meet some of these goals in the CCMP or actions in the CCMP. But also we recognize you've got constraints. So.
Thank you for your thoughts on the issue, Claire. Other members of the executive committee have thoughts on this?
Member Clark has her hand raised.
Yes, go ahead, Kelly.
And I actually just wanted to, Walter raised an interesting point. One benefit to amending the resolution now is that it would be sent out before the next governing board meeting, which would allow the public opportunity to prepare and to comment on any changes that we put in there, as opposed to having to do it at the meeting itself without the time.
Excellent point, Claire. Thank you.
Can any members of the public add anything?
Can I
that this
Tom?
After public comment?
Jane, hold off, please. Tom?
So Charlie, we opened the door a crack and allowed Walter to make a quick, perhaps I could say, editorial comment on the matter. Roy was given that same opportunity. I see that Patricia and Jane have their hands up. I imagine others might want to also chime in, and I'm sensitive to the clock here, but if we can allow each of these folks, I'd say what was about 30 seconds that I saw was taken by Walter and Roy, that we would also allow that to be made available to these other people.
Yes, Tom, I fully agree. I'm looking to build consensus among the executive committee as to how to proceed, and I'm getting a sense of that consensus. So I appreciate your thoughts and comments. Next person, Jane, 30 seconds.
Yes, thank you. I just want to say that this strikes me as a continued demonization of the Biona wetlands as it stands now. In order to be able to make the argument, we need to destroy the wetlands to protect it. Obviously, homelessness is a global, a national crisis in Venice, California, and San Francisco, and New York, et cetera. So it's not unique to the Biona wetlands, and it's also a result of the willful neglect by CDFW and others to allow it to deteriorate so they can make the argument that they need to destroy it so they can then reinvent it and award all sorts of contracts for water fountains and bathrooms and everything that's going to destroy the wildlife that is there currently.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you. Patricia?
Thank you, Jane, for that. I agree wholeheartedly with what you just said. There are bathrooms across the street that are available. There are bathrooms across over by the boating facilities that are available. So we're not without these facilities. But I would also like to bring up the fact that I used to go through Area A in particular. I basically lived in there taking imagery and stuff that I used in the original EIR for Playa Vista. And at that time, we had a guard truck from Playa Vista. We did not have the problems that we have now since CDFW has taken over. So once again, getting back to Jane's comments about this being a created situation.
Excuse me, Patricia,
yes, we have more housing, but
30 seconds.
it is in part a created situation. Thank you.
Thank you for your thoughts, Patricia. Shelley, if you would like to make your suggested changes or additions in the form of a motion, I'd appreciate it.
Sure, and I may need some help in how that's structured. I will read some suggested language to be added as whereas statements, so I can make a motion to approve the staff recommendation with the following amendments. Is that the right way to do it? Okay. I would like to add several statements. Here is the first one. Whereas the reserve has few public services in most areas and a known presence of homeless encampments and illegal activities, including drug use and the storage, processing, and transportation of stolen goods. Whereas substantial hazards are present that endanger the public and expose the state of California to legal liability. And whereas the best way to increase public access is to implement the state's restoration plan with its trail system and critical services, including restrooms, drinking fountains, and other services. That's all.
I'll second.
Member Wagner has her hand raised.
Caitlin, yeah, so I did like the recommendation to include the modifications that Member Luce just mentioned. I can't verify if those are true or correct. That's not my expertise, but I think in this spirit, as Member Clark said, I think it's better to have it out for public comment between now and the next meeting for consideration and comment. I think it's better for transparency, and then whether or not it gets left in or removed, you know, that can be up to the bigger governing board. One option that we've used in the past is putting it really clear as optional additional text, but kind of flagging it as separate. That's something that the State Water Board has used in the event that members are not necessarily in consensus of the content that's suggested, but just so that it's out there for consideration.
Claire, wonderful, wonderful suggestion in terms of making the process clear and efficient. Shelley, I lost my internet connection briefly and did not hear all of your suggestion. That's immaterial. As I now ask, is there a second to Shelley's motion for suggested additions?
I'll second.
Thank you, Kelly. I would like are there any other suggested additions to this resolution? I'm looking for comment from the executive committee members only. Seeing none, I would ask Caitlin to call a roll vote on these suggested modifications. And Caitlin, call the roll, please.
Certainly. Apologies, give me 1 second to prepare my screen to share. Thank you. So, Chair Caspary?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Clark?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Gray?
She told me she has to leave early.
Okay. Let me see if alternate Caldwell is on the line. It doesn't look like it. Okay. Member Littman?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Luce?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Tremblay?
Yes.
Thank you. And Member Wagoner?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes.
Thank you very much. There were two other items that were suggested earlier on for addition to the governing board meeting for next month. One of those was a confirmation of the adoption of the National Estuary Program logo. And the other one was a presentation on community engagement during the COVID-19 pandemic. Is that an accurate description of it, Tom?
Yes, Charlie. I think what I was hoping for was to help illustrate, the creativity that a number of the staff working on those projects took on to try to help continue to make the impact that program is intended to make within that given work plan. So yes, please.
Thank you. So if I would like to make a motion, I'm going to ask for a motion to recommend that the governing board agenda for next month include the three items as outlined in the agenda for today. Items 2DI, 2DII, and 2D triple I, in addition to the confirmation of the NEP logo and the community outreach and engagement. Do we have a motion on that? Can you hear me?
I'll move. This is Timothy.
Thank you, Timothy. Thank you, Martha.
I will say I'm a little concerned that we won't have enough time, but I'll move.
Yeah.
Caitlin, call the roll, please.
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
before you call the vote, actually, I do want to share one piece of information, even though I'm not sure whether this will impact the vote or not. That is actually based on the latest information we have from the states for the June governing board meeting. We are preparing and we're planning and prepare the high possibility to resume in-person meeting because the governor's executive order will expire on June 15th, and our meeting is scheduled for June 17th. And the only indication that is that the state agencies will be required to resume in-person meeting. And even though highly likely that it will be in a hybrid model, meaning that not all members will need to be present, but at least one or few members be present and to allow public to present at the physical location. So I just want to share that.
Thank you. I am hoping that the governor will issue an interim order that will allow us to transition in a hybrid mode and I know there's state legislation also that's going through the hopper, or proposed legislation that will allow hybrid virtual and in-person meetings going forward. It's unclear with the timing on those, but Tom, you had a comment on that?
No, Charlie, it was actually in response to Timothy's stated concerns about the ability to manage everything on that agenda at the upcoming meeting. What I would say is that the informational item I'm talking about providing is an easy one for us to push. If we can leave it on the agenda and we get a chance to get to it, that's great. If not, it is our staff who are, available, and it won't impact them or our schedules pronouncedly if we have to postpone.
Okay. Well, we have a motion and a second to approve the proposed agenda for the governing board meeting. Will you call the roll, Caitlin?
Certainly. Chair Caspery.
Yes.
Thank you. Member Clark?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Littman?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Luce?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Tremblay?
Yes.
Thank you. And Member Wagoner?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion is approved.
Thank you very much. Let's move to item number 3, member comments. Anybody have a comment that they would like to make?
Yes.
Yes, Martha.
Hi, I guess I'll just report that last week when Guan Yu gave his update to the regional board, we also were looking for approval from the regional board on a special study related to our joint water pollution control plan. And basically it's a study to support EPA's efforts on the Superfund site, the DDT Superfund site. We're going to collect this year sediment, water column, and fish samples. So we're just doing all the field work, and then EPA is going to have all those analyzed for DDT, PCBs. Basically, it's to help inform their next steps on the Superfund site. So that got approved by the regional board.
That's wonderful. And a question, Martha, the trustees of the McKesson settlement was formed to remediate the issue, that there's very little up-to-date information on the trustees' websites like Ocean Protection Council and NOAA and things like that. And
I'm sorry, when you say, you mean Montrose? Montrose was
yes,
the company that manufactured DDT. Okay, so your question is that there's little information on, our settlement, the original settlement consent decree was with NOAA. Is that what you mean? There's not much information on their end? I mean, EPA is the lead regulatory agency on the project. So there is information on their website. I can forward you if you're interested in, whatever information is there. But yeah, I'm not familiar with what would be on the resource agency site besides EPA.
That'd be great. Thank you, Martha.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Other comments?
Member Wagner.
Claire.
Go
ahead, Claire.
Just an announcement that the vacancy to backfill for Guang Yu is still open and we're actively recruiting. So I just appreciate it if people want to solicit that vacancy announcement. The position's open through Friday, May 28th, and we're just hoping to get a great candidate in. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments?
Member Luce has her hand raised.
Yes, Shelley.
Thank you. There was a really interesting article recently about a proposal. It's not a plan, but it's a concept proposal for extending the Biona Creek bike path further upstream and creating greener corridors or greenways, and creating a small park at the point where the creek daylights. It's mostly underground upstream of Cochrane Avenue and Venice Boulevard intersection. It looks really amazing, and it would be a wonderful amenity for our watershed. So I just wanted to mention it here, and I can send a link to Caitlin if you'd like to provide it to anyone. It's something that I'm sure will need public support in the future.
That's great. I wanted to add that Assembly Bill 963 is in Assembly Appropriations Committee today, and that is the piece of legislation that will expand the influence of the Baldwin Hills Conservancy. It's now going to be called Baldwin Hills Conservancy and Urban Watersheds Agency, and it is going to increase its footprint that will cover virtually all of the Biona Creek watershed, and maybe even some of the Biona Creek Ecological Reserve, although that's unclear to me at this point. But thank you for that, Shelley. That would be a wonderful addition. Erica, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Charlie. I just wanted to say that I'll talk to our Superfund program about if giving an update on the Montrose settlement or on PV shelf at a later meeting. It sounds like June is busy, so I can touch base with them if that's.
That'd be great. It's not something I'm involved with regularly, but I just remember that we were getting reports that they expected to find DDT. Historically, they couldn't find it a year or two ago, and they're all kind of scratching their heads. And I'd love to know what's going on out there. So that's a wonderful suggestion, and I'm sure that we can have staff get that scheduled before the end of the year. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, and then I have a request about, I know the changing, going back to in person, maybe offline discussions of what that. I definitely think a hybrid. I know for someone, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we're not even allowed to go on site visits. So that may change soon. It's unclear to me what the state reopening on June 15th means for us. So I know that in the past, Megan Cooper from Coastal Conservancy had said, the potential for using their offices, zooming in from there. But I would definitely encourage us to, even if it's awkward, to maintain that option, at least for a while. Thank you.
We'll get it figured out.
Yeah.
Collectively.
Eric, it'll be just like when you're watching the baseball game. We're just going to have a cutout of your face sitting in the stands, and then you can participate remotely. It's going to be
Any
great.
other member comments? Okay, we are going to move to closed session. The regular open session of the meeting, we will go into a waiting room if you want to wait. And at the conclusion of the closed session, council will report if necessary. Thank you. So Caitlin, if you would go ahead and move us over to the
Charlie, this is Eric. I'd like to just go ahead and make the closed session announcement, if that's okay.
Sure.
All right. So as Charlie just noted, the executive committee, the voting members are going to be going into closed session under Government Code Section 11126 to discuss litigation filed against the commission. The caption on that case is Biona Wetlands Land Trust versus Santa Monica Bay Restoration Commission. Identified item 2E little I on the agenda. And like Chair Casper said, we'll go into closed session. The open session will be on pause, and then we'll reopen open session to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you for that. I should have let the experts deal with that announcement from the get-go.
Okay, I can now move all voting EC members to a breakout room, and then I will move all the remaining participants to the waiting room.
Main room, are we all here?
Yes. Room. Eric, do you have anything to report from the closed session?
Hi, this is Eric Gilman again, counsel for the commission, and there's nothing to report from the closed session.
Very good. Thank you very much. The meeting of the executive committee is adjourned. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for participating. Goodbye, all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. See you next month.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.